So hi everyone. I'm going to talk now in this talk about components, not about micro frontends or Webpack or state management, just good old simple components. And I want to start because I like nostalgia. I want to start with a tale, with a short story about the tragedy of Recompose. So for those who are not familiar with Recompose, it was a very popular, it is a React library. It was very popular in 2015, 2016, and 2017. I've seen it in many projects even here in Israel. So it was very popular back in the day. And the reason it was very popular was because it solved two really big problems in React back then. The first one was using state and functional components. We could only do that in class components back then. And the second problem was sharing behavior or logic between UI components that need to behave the same but to look different. Just to emphasize what is the second problem. So let's say I have an app and I have a homepage and a profile page and I have two counters I have a counter in each page. And it's a special counter. It's a counter that starts in 10, not in 0. And in the homepage, I want to render it with these blue round buttons, and on the profile page with these ghost buttons with text. So Recompose provided us with a with state function. We could wrap both of the counters with a with state function, and then we can also use state and functional components and also share logic between these two components. But then came hooks, and kind of made the use of Recompose obsolete, because now we can simply use state in our functional components, and we can create custom hooks to share the logic of the counter between the two counters. So Andrew Clark, the maintainer of Recompose, declared on GitHub that hooks solve all the problems he tried to address with Recompose, and he will be discontinuing active maintenance of this package. Rest in peace, Recompose. That was the tragedy of Recompose. And what I learned from this tragedy was that it's very hard to reuse and share stateful logic between UI components. That's from the React docs, from the hooks page. It's not just me. And it's so hard and it's such a big problem that React need to come up with their own solution for the community, which is hooks. Now, it gets more complicated than that. Those are just simple counters. I would probably duplicate and write the logic twice and won't create an abstraction, but it can get more complicated. And with components like menu that has accessibility and keyboard navigation and all of that. And I think headless UI components or hooks in React can be the solution, and that's what I'm mainly going to talk about. So this talk is about what is headless UI in React, why do we need it. We will talk a little bit about inversion of control and how headless UI components or hooks apply this design pattern. And also about headless UI libraries and component libraries like Material UI. There will be no deep dive into code in this talk, just a little bit. So I just want us to grasp the general concept. A little bit about me. I'm doing front-end development for the past 6 years. I'm working at Gloat for the past 5 years, and I'm leading the front-end team and the front-end development for the past 2.5 years. I also love memes very much. I created the Meme King app. I hope someone here knows it, because it's kind of popular, but I'm not sure like everyone knows it. So it's an app that lets you create funny memes. And I'm also co-hosting the Front-End Land podcast, which is a podcast about front-end in Hebrew. We're like everywhere in Spotify and all of that. Okay, let's start. So, what is headless UI in React? Headless UI utilities in React are components or hooks that are in charge of state, logic, and behavior, but do not provide any default markup or styling. And when I say markup, I mean JSX or HTML, and when I say styling, I mean CSS. They're basically components or hooks that render nothing. And I will continue now with another short story, and this time it's a story about a menu, and it's based on a true story that really happened in real life. And it all started 3 years ago when I got this Figma from our designer, and he said, "Hey Nir, for your new feature, please implement this menu." Now, I wasn't a junior developer back then. I built a few menus in my life before, and I knew that it's not going to be that simple. And the reason it's not going to be that simple is because of this stuff. First of all, accessibility. We will need, and we had lots of discussions today in other talks about accessibility, but we need to implement stuff like keyboard navigation, screen reader support, valid markup, and the worst thing of all to try to implement yourself, focus management. Don't try to implement it yourself. But I did this menu, I took a couple of weeks and implemented this menu, and on the left side we can see the UI, and on the right side we can see the code. It's a simple menu item, it has one prop, it's called items, and we shipped that code to production, and everyone were super happy. A month later, another designer from the design team came to another developer on my team and asked her to, in her new feature, to render the drop-down above the button. So she added a menu position prop to the menu. She shipped that to production. Everyone were happy once again. But what she didn't know back then and what I didn't know back then was that when you accept one change request from the design team, they will keep, it's like opening the gates of hell. So it's gonna happen again and again and again. So this cycle went on for a few more times in the next couple of months. First, they wanted a tooltip above the button, so we added a with the tooltip prop. And a month later, in a different feature, but only in that feature, they wanted a different tooltip text, so we added a tooltip text prop. And they wanted an icon on the left side of each menu item, so we added an item icon prop. A month later, they wanted, when I hover, to change the color of the menu background color to blue, but only in that feature, not everywhere. So we added a menu item hover color prop, and then they wanted some functionality change that in this new feature that now we're releasing, we should not close the button when we click the menu item, so we added a prevent close on click prop. And 1 year later, we ended up with this. Yeah. Now, nobody likes that. I sure doesn't like that. But what made me feel a little bit better is, like, I was asking myself, like, how did we get here? What did we do wrong? But what made me feel a little bit better was looking at React Select. I need a computer now. So React Select, for those who are not familiar with it, it's a select component, heavily used by the React community. And if we will look at its props page, we will see that I can scroll down for hours. I won't get to the bottom of the page. Like I can try really hard, but yeah. So that problem is not just my own. And I had to think like what got me to this mess and what got React Select to that mess. And I think the answer to that is that building UI is a very branded and custom experience. Each product and each design team wants, or each company wants their product to look a little bit different, and every company has different needs. We can take a look at 5 menus from 5 apps that we all use. They all behave the same because they have to, because they need to support the same screen readers and browsers, but they all look a little bit different. Now, myself at Gloat, I had 4 designers to handle, but React Select is used by hundreds of thousands of people around the world, and every user wants their own, every developer that uses it wants their own unique cases, and there are endless use cases that are UI and style related that people can ask from React Select to support. So React Select is doing a lot of, need to support a lot of use cases that related to UI and style. Now, we used our menu in a lot of products and in too many places, so we couldn't do a refactor yet because it was working in production and we don't touch working code in production. So we moved on with our lives. But 2 months later, I saw this picture. This is a picture of our design team in a meeting. And while I was walking around that office, I thought like, they're probably thinking about more ways of ruining my life. And I was right. They came out of that room and they wanted me to implement sections. They said, hey, Nir, keep the accessibility behavior, keep the keyboard navigation, the styling, but we need you to add sections. Now, I've implemented sections before in an autocomplete. It's the same problem, the same concept. And it was one of the hardest things I've did that is related to UI because of keyboard navigation and other stuff. So that's one. And the second thing is my menu, the code of the menu component looks bad from the outside. Imagine how bad it looks from the inside because of all of that props. The render method is so long and so complex and has so many ifs because I need to support so many use cases. Yeah. What's next? Okay. So we said now it's the time to do a refactor because we can't continue like that anymore. And we needed to think when we started refactoring, what's the problem here? What's the problem we are trying to solve? And the problem is that our menu is in charge of too many things. It's in charge of state, if it's open or closed, and the active item index. It's in charge of logic, keyboard navigation, and focus management, accessibility stuff, markup rendering, and styling. So it's in charge of too many things, and we need to start reduce some responsibility from the menu component, and we started by applying the inversion of control design pattern. Now this is a quote by Kenzie Dose. I've taken it from an article by Kenzie Dose. I changed the wording a little bit to fit my talk, but the concept is the same. And inversion of control in React means make your abstraction, in our case a component, do less stuff, and make the developers that are using it do this stuff instead. How does it look on practice? So if we will take a look at on the left side, I have the 3 props that are helping me design the menu item, and I simply replace them with the render item function. Now, it's instead of me telling the menu how to render the menu item, the menu calls to me, the developer, for me to tell him how to render the menu item. This is the simplest implementation of inversion of control, and we all use that every day. Now, it's true, I had 3 props, now I have 1 prop, so I have less 2 props, but that's not the big deal here. The big deal here is now I can support in the future in probably every weird use cases that my designers would want regarding to the rendering of the menu item. So it looked like this, but it's not enough. So we wanted to take it 1 step further. And the second part of the refactor was making a menu a hook. And in our case, it's important to say that hook is a type of headless UI. Headless UI in React can be hooks and can be components. Hooks usually don't render anything. So we created a use menu hook. And basically by creating this use menu hook that replaces our original menu, we basically told him, look at me, I'm the developer. I'm in charge of styling and rendering now. Let's do a demo to see how it works in practice. First, I have the menu component in the components folder, but all I export from the menu component is 4 dumb UI components, style components, the menu dropdown, the menu button, the menu item, and the menu container, this one that wraps everything. Now let's go to the home page, because we're looking on the right side on the browser, we can see the home page. And in the home page, we need to render a menu. So I created a homepage menu component, and it calls the use menu hook. The use menu hook's purpose is to be in charge only of accessibility, logic, and state, not rendering or styling of any way. And we are rendering the stupid UI components, but and they are totally stuck. They don't do anything. But the menu doesn't work yet. When I click it, nothing happens, and it's always open. That's because I need now to start interacting with the use menu hook, because that's its purpose. So the use menu hooks will provide, the hook will provide is open flag. So I will know if it's open, and only if it's open, I can render the dropdown. So now we don't have it, but we don't have we don't see the dropdown, but the button still doesn't work. So we will extract another thing from the use menu hook, get button props, which is a function that we will spread after we will call it, because it returns an object. And what button props returns is accessibility props like aria and role and such, and also event listener like on click and on focus. So this button can do things as well. So if we will save now, I hope, yeah, it's working. So now we can open and nice. Now let's try to do some of the stuff. Wait. Let's try to do some of the stuff we wanted to do before with props, but now we will do it ourselves because now we control the rendering. Let's say we want to render the button, the dropdown above the button, so we can just take the button and render it here. And now when we will open it, so it will be above. And I don't need a prop for that now. And if I want to wrap the button with a tooltip, like we needed props for before, so we can just wrap it with a tooltip and give it whatever title we want to. Yeah, and it works. So now we did that as well. And if we want to change the background color of the menu item, we can simply use our favorite CSS solution, which is in my case, not in my case for the example, simple CSS. So I can just give it like a blue class name and hope that it will work. So a lot of the things we needed props to do before, we can now do without any props. Now I only showed here styling stuff that we can do ourselves, but use menu also provide stuff like set is open. So I can control when and if I want to open or close the menu, depends on the situation or whatever my designers will think of. Yeah, so that was the demo. Now I have two drawbacks about this demo. It's better not to use menu all over the app. If you have 100 menus in your application, so what I would probably do is create 4 components that wraps use menu and use menu hook. I will call it a normal menu, a menu with sections, a menu that renders the dropdown on the top, and in those places I will use menu. And if I will have some absurd requirement in 6 months from the design team, I can use it in another place as well. So that's the first drawback. And the second one is, please don't try building a use menu hook at home yourself like I did here. I will say in a second. Yeah, no, specifically a use menu hook. That was for the sake of the example and showing like what headless UI hooks are. And the reason we don't want to build a use menu hook at home is because of this slide. This is a slide from Pedro Duarte's talk in Next.js Conf in 2021, where he described how much time and effort it took them to build their own drop-down menu. And it's a lot of effort and a lot of time. And the reason it took them a lot of time is because of this stuff. This menu should work well on multiple browsers and multiple devices. It should worry about accessibility stuff, keyboard navigation, screen reader support, and there are multiple screen readers we need to support, not just one. So it adds more complexity. Focus management, which is another thing, and we need to support stuff like positioning with this stuff, like what happens in these situations. So no one's got time for positioning and focus management. We need to ship a product for our company with our business goals. We don't want to spend months building the right dropdown. So headless UI libraries come to our rescue in that situation. Headless UI libraries. And Ran Barzik mentioned one in his talk, not one of these. They provide us with use menu hooks like the one that I built. But they worked on them for 6 months and they've tested it everywhere. And they are very, very reliable. And they thought about edge cases that we don't have time to think about. And they are also backed by very, very serious people. Look at the guys and girls behind these libraries. So it's not a niche, it's getting more and more mainstream. And I want to, in short, show 2 of them. The first one is Downshift by Kenzie Dodds, that provides, for example, a use select hook, very similar to my use menu hook. So you can call use select and you can render whatever HTML or JSX or CSS you want. So that's one type of a headless library. And the other one, let's take a look at Radix. Radix is a headless UI library that doesn't provide hooks. They provide components. So they do render markup, but it's totally unstyled. Let's take a look at their accordion. Here the accordion is styled, but it's only for the example. If you will try to render their accordion, it will be it will have zero styling, but it has accessibility and it is unstyled and it can be animated, and you can take this accordion and make it look like whatever your designers wants it to look like. And they support also drop-down menus and popovers and that and many other UI components. I think there's a mistake with the time. I think I have 5 more minutes after. Yeah, okay. So that was headless UI libraries. And let's talk a little bit about headless UI libraries versus component-based libraries like Material UI, Chakra UI, React Bootstrap, or whatever, or God forbid, Undesign. So in last February, I wrote a blog post on Medium about headless components in React and why I stopped using a component library like Material UI for our design system at Gloat. And it got a lot of traction. I got tired of like people asking what's the best UI library to use with React, and I said no one. And in this blog post, I'm telling the story, another story about a multi-combo box I needed to implement at Gloat. And the first thing I did when I got this Figma from our designer was to go to Material UI and see how their multi-combo box looks like, and try to change it to fit this design. Now, taking this component and trying to make it look and behave like this one was a nightmare. It felt something like this meme. It felt like I'm abusing Material UI to doing stuff it doesn't want to do. I wrote very complex, dirty code that, in my opinion, will be very hard to maintain. And so yeah, that means sums it up. So I choose downshift for that purpose, and I imported the use combo box hook, and with their use combo box hook and my HTML and my CSS, we use style components, by the way. We've built our combo box component. So there are different trade-offs when you think about when to use headless UI libraries and when to use ready-made component-based libraries. I just want to mention in a sentence that in headless UI libraries, there is more work on us, the developers. That's a trade-off. It's not simply rendering a menu. You need to do some work, but you have full control over markup, and you can use whatever CSS or styling solution you want for all the Tailwind fans here. So when to use each, that's like what I try to answer in my blog post. And the answer, like always, is that it depends on the situation. At Gloat, I needed to implement really custom functionality and custom design requirements. So using Material UI just wasn't worth it anymore. I needed to use something else, and the headless UI libraries were the perfect solution for me. But if I needed to ship a product very fast, or I can take Material UI, not do a lot of effort in order to change its functionality and design, I would probably use that. So it depends on the use case. And I've said before that headless UI libraries are becoming more mainstream. So the proof of that to me is a Material UI base. It's a new library or a package by Material UI itself. It's currently in alpha, and it's Material UI version of headless components. So even Material UI are going in that direction. They will provide headless, unstyled React UI components and low-level hooks. They feature the same robust engineering, but without implementing material design. You can use any styling solution and no need to override any default styling engine or theme. So even Material UI is going in that direction. It's currently in alpha. And they provide like hooks like if you need to render, for example, a pagination component, but you want it with your styling and not the Material UI one, so they provide a use pagination hook with all the complex logic pagination should support. So summary, building UI is a very custom experience. building accessible UI is very hard. There are a lot of talks today about accessibility. So yeah, it's really hard. Headless UI components or hooks help you decouple complex UI logic from your style and your markup. And headless UI libraries are getting mainstream, so I really recommend checking them out. And please follow me on Twitter. I don't have followers. I need people to follow me. I post funny memes about React and frontend. So that's it. Thank you.